right. Hello, hello. Let's animate, or shall I say, let's color our animation. Here we are, back at it again, and obviously making good progress here. So great. Today is the 25th, getting toward the end of June here. So good, good. All right. So there's the frame we're at. So we'll just carry on with our color. We've been painting behind. So, yeah, and we've got our palette here. Of course, we can pick the colors because we're locked in with the palette in this program. For anyone who's just joining us, we're working in Rough Animator, which is a very user-friendly program. It would have to be because I'm using it. So, yeah, it's a very easy program to work with. Very, very easy, very user friendly. Not complicated at all. And also very inexpensive desktop program. This desktop version is $10, and you pay for it. You're not paying for a subscription, so you're not having to make a monthly payment on this program. You pay for it outright. So it's like Procreate or any of the other um, um, programs that you just buy outright and you own it, which is the way it should be for all of us who are trying to save money, and Lord knows we want to do that. It's a great program, so I highly recommend Rough Animator. And you can do quite a bit with it. Um, quite a bit. So, good program. I got nothing but good things to say about it. Um, you can use, you can do color with it. You can do, there's things you can do. There's a lot of things you can do with it. So, anyways, but I'm purposely, for anyone who's just joining me, I do hope you go back. If you're interested in animating and coloring your work and making your own films, um, this is a great program to work in. And I'm doing this demo, or I have been doing this demo rather, in real time. Unlike a lot of the videos that you see on YouTube, where they will do a time lapse over many, sometimes hours, to show you how to do something. I'm doing this in real time. That's why there's so many of these um, demos that you're seeing. If you're going hitting my YouTube channel and you're seeing, oh, I got a part one and this is part 7, 8, or whatever, that's why. Because I teach classes online and I like to be very thorough. I like to make sure that anybody that takes a class with me understands what they're doing step by step. Uh, I teach the way I would like to be taught myself. There is a tendency sometimes with computer classes and things where it would seem that the teachers a lot of times seem to be in a hurry. They hurry up and tell you something, and a lot of times you just don't get it. And you walk out feeling like either you're just an idiot and you didn't pay enough attention or whatever. So I teach in real time so that hopefully you get it and you're not missing anything. I could see how in a scenario where you're uh, having to go back and study the video that you looked at to find out what did they do. It's like, well, I guess so. I guess so. I'm not going to say that that isn't valid. I'm sure a lot of folks maybe have learned fine how to use various platforms. So I'm not I'm not intentionally attacking people who teach this way. I'm just saying learning is difficult enough without us having to decipher and unwind the yarn to find out how you made the sock. You know, my belief is that you need to explain in steps in real time how you're doing something. And I'll even go as far as to say that even in my career as an animator working in the business, I seldom found situations where even people within a studio would sit and animate in front of you and show you step by step. You still had to kind of figure things out, you know. It was almost as though people were trying to hide their styles so that suddenly you wouldn't learn animation so you wouldn't be as good as they are. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I would think that the whole purpose of teaching somebody something is to teach them something, to actually literally show them how to do it step by step. What's wrong with that? Well, that's what I'm doing here. Okay. I am going step by step and I'm showing you step by step, in no uncertain terms, how to do this. I've gone through the entire scene, I've animated it step by step. That's why there's so many parts. So for anybody who's starting this out and they haven't seen any of these and they click on my YouTube channel and they go part 7 and they go, what's he, I am doing this in real time. Okay. And where we are now with the color is the last stages of doing this. So the animation's been done. If you go back and look at the other clips, you'll see that I literally talked about how I animated it, how I posed it out, what the poses were, things that I was thinking about while I was posing it out. Because like I said, in my mind, all of that's important. And this is hand-drawn animation. I'm not copying somebody's animation. I'm not using live-action reference. None of that. This is just out of my head. This is just drawing animation. Okay, the way we used to do it in the old days. All right. Why is that necessarily an art? Why do we need to do that? Well, you might want to do it. It's also the same reason why people need to learn how to draw from life and how they need how to take life drawing classes. You know, everybody wants to take a shortcut to do something, but the reality is there are no real shortcuts. Not if you want to be really good at something. You know, if you learn things from the ground up, what happens is you start to have some confidence in what you're doing. That doesn't automatically mean that what you do is going to be perfect or anything. That's not what I mean. It just means that you're going to have there's going to be a level of competency that you're going to have. I'm doing the eyes now right here. That's if you're wondering what I'm doing here. I forgot the color in the eyes. I was too busy ranting. This is the tongue. Um, okay, same thing on this one. Eyes are white. The white in the eyes a lot of times is a duller color than the light on the screen. So, it looks like I'm not doing anything, but I really am. There's my palette for color on that. Okay. And we're in here. Whites in the eyes. So, anyways, yeah. Taking the time to learn things in the right order is just a smart thing to do. Okay? It just is. So, it is to your advantage to take the time to learn what you need to know step by step by step. It just helps you. And as I said before, it gives you confidence in what it is you're doing. You need that, you know. If you take a life drawing class and you learn how to draw and you learn anatomy, you learn the bones and you learn the skeleton and you learn the muscles, what that does is it gives you confidence that you actually understand what you're looking at. So when you go into a museum, for instance, and you look at a Rembrandt or you look at a Degas or you look at a Van Gogh or you look at a Michelangelo or whatever you're looking at, and you see anatomy in a form or something like that, you know what you're looking at. You know, in order, a lot of the folks who did, some of the great impressionist painters, if they're painting a human being and they're doing an impressionistic version, or even an abstract version, they still a lot. I mean, Picasso took anatomy. Picasso, there were drawing books and drawings of that Picasso had that you could find that showed that Picasso was a competent artist, a competent draftsman before he started on his abstract journey. I just think that you need to have basics. It gives you a very strong foundation that you can build on top of, and you want that. That's in your. That's in your. That's to your favor. That's to your credit. So don't ever feel like that. Okay, well, let me just get to the point. Well, let me just. I don't want to learn that anatomy stuff. Oh, animation. Oh, I can film myself and then I can use that for the animation. Well, yeah, you can. You can. Sure. You and about 27,000 other people, all your animation looks the frickin' same. What about something that's unique? Hmm? What about something that you did, something out of your head, something out of your heart? What about your communication as an artist? What about that? Okay. It's like writing a novel, but you don't know how to write. You don't know literature. You don't know poetry. You don't know history. Yeah, you can write something, sure. You're going to be a little bit more effective as an artist or writer or whatever it is you do if you understand the basic tools needed for you to do the job. You know, that's what we're saying here. I was trained by the best. You know, and I don't know everything either. I don't know everything. I don't. But I have confidence. I know I'm a competent artist. I can communicate what I want to communicate. And here's something else that happens too. Even within all of this, where you go to the trouble of learning and everything, even your colleagues, even the folks around you, you start to really find out a lot about your colleagues when you're working with them because there is a lot of frustration and attitude and disingenuousness about artists. What do I mean? Well, you got everything from people being jealous about certain artists because they're better, or they seem like they have certain abilities that are more developed. Some folks are truly blessed. Some folks just have, um, I don't know what's the word, I guess a natural affinity to do stuff. And they're just really, really good. And then you have, most of the rest of us who work pretty damn hard to just get to a level of what we would consider to be competent artists, good enough, or, if we're given a problem, we can solve it, you know. Why am I bringing that up? Because, within artist circles, you got that competitive thing. And I guess that's a good thing on the one way because what it does is, or at least for me, and I can only speak of myself for myself, I think it forced me to work harder, and working harder is good. The way I see it, I still see it. I mean, there were the artists that everybody talked about. They were the best. You know, I'm not going to necessarily name too many names here, but I'll bring up a couple of Disney guys because they're the ones that tend to be the more um, important ones to mention. Someone like Frank Thomas or Milt Call or those guys who were the top of the food chain when it comes to the Disney animators. And people would work really hard to try to imitate what they did and all that. And that's great because to some degree it's great because what it does is it gives you a what's the word, um, it gives you something to aspire to, you know. But what I found was that you'd be lucky to find people who say would support you, truly support you, without there being some jealousy or whatever. And I can only speak of myself. Uh, you know, was I ever jealous of other artists? not jealous, but I always found myself being like, wow. I just would have, I would be amazed. You know, there's some artists that I just watched them do what they did, and I just thought, wow, that's really out there. You know, I mean, that's really amazing work. And I've always been of the belief that you should call it what it is. If someone, you know, if Mozart walks in the room, you know, that's Mozart, right? And you know, I mean, would have respect for if I'm a musician and Mozart walks in the room, I'm gonna respect Mozart. And I remember when the movie Amadeus came out, and I thought, wow, you know, Amadeus was for me. It's a wonderful film. If you've never seen it, you should see it. But what I loved about Amadeus was that it made a real statement about how artists are. you know, um, it made a statement about jealousy. It made a statement about purpose. But there was, you know, of course, the movie. Well, if you've never seen it, I don't. Well, if you've never seen it, I guess I shouldn't say too much about it because I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it. I'll just say go see it. Okay, it's a great movie. I don't like to be a spoiler on the movie, but I bring it up because it's a good movie for artists because it says a lot about how artists can be or how artists are. And anyway, anyway, boy, I'm getting into some stuff here. Anyways, no, I mean, you know, the years I spent at Disney. Disney was where I got my primary training, and you know, I met some of the most talented people in the business, and I have mad respect for all of them. And I would name names, and there have been times I have named names, and I may do that in some cases, not for any other reason than to give praise to those who I felt very, you know, a certain, you know, appreciation for at least to have known them, you know, yeah, of my ilk of people or my group of people. I don't know that I'd say I was in their class. I don't know if I'd be bold enough to say that. Probably I wouldn't say that necessarily because I would put them maybe a little bit considerably higher than myself. But at the same time, it's like we were all learning kind of the same way. And it was just a very interesting time, the time that I spent there and what I learned. And it was not just at Disney. I mean, every place I worked with people who I had a lot of respect for, who were very good animators. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, what I've noticed was that artists don't generally tell other artists how they do what they do. And I used to get the mentality that it's because they were afraid that if you tell somebody how you're doing what you're doing, they're going to do it better than you. And in fact, when I first started teaching, I didn't think that way when I was teaching. In fact, it was just the opposite. The thing that I like about teaching is I learn stuff because I see myself do things wrong, or I see how I see that there's things that I think I'm explaining, and I have to kind of go back and say, wait a minute, now is that clear? Did what I just say make any sense? You know, to the person. And when I'm literally teaching a person, I always have to remind myself, like, I wonder if they understood that. This is why I like one-on-one teaching so much better than I do full classroom teaching, because with one-on-one teaching, that person doesn't have to feel bad about asking a question, you know, because it's just them and me instead of them and, you know, 20 other people in the same class, of which ultimately there are going to be some that are going to be ahead of the curve than others. Almost every class situation is really kind of like that, you know. But it's the way things have to be. You know, if you walk into a class, you can't. You know, the teacher isn't. It's not always going to be the teacher and the student. You know, you know. the Jedi Master and the Padawan or whatever. I mean, it would take a long time to teach a lot of people if you did things that way. But obviously, there's nothing better than having a scenario where it is like you literally one on one. So, anyways, um, so, but I've learned that just getting the information and being able to absorb that information and then use it to the best effect for you as an individual artist. There's a lot involved in getting to that. And I have taught classes with numerous students, and I have discovered that there always are going to be those students that they're just ahead of the curve. They smarter than some of the other students. They're better. They have better skills, and they pick up the information quicker, and that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But then what happens is sometimes the people who aren't quite there get lost, and they don't understand the material or whatever, or they don't do the homework or whatever. So you know, anyways, there you have it. So yeah, so that's why so like I said, I'm doing this as a real time thing so that you can see what I'm doing. And even though this is not a class in the truest sense, well, maybe the truest is, I don't know. You can, if you like, if you had a question, for instance, and you wanted to drop it in the comments, um, I will read it. You know, because right now I'm not getting a lot of comments on stuff, and so if somebody drops a comment in there, chances are I'm gonna see it, probably read it. If it is something that you wanted to know, or you said I didn't understand this or that, yeah, feel free to do that. Because right now I'm not I'm not inundated. I'm not popular enough right now to be inundated with comments. So that's fine. I'm doing this because I like it, and I just want to share it with you. So there you go. All right, so we're painting our guy, and once again, I'm working underneath the line. I mentioned earlier that, I like to work over a sketchy line because it just saves me time. But your production quality is something that you have to determine. And some of you might want to do a cleaner line than this, or give it more of an inked quality, or you might even want to have lines that are in color. And in future demonstrations, I will try to make it a point to do something like that so you can see how I do that. The color ink lines would be done on a separate layer. So the reason that I don't do it here is because it's just another stage or another step in doing the final scene. And I'm just trying to save myself some time, that's all. I'm trying to get to the final thing as soon as I can. I don't want the scene to take um, 20 weeks or whatever. I want to get her done. What I'm doing also, just to explain for those who maybe just popped in, I paint to the edges underneath the line. This over here, there's a little thing that says draw behind. Down there was where my mouse is. Yeah, I paint underneath the line, but I paint around the edges so that I can just do the paint bucket to drop the color in. The eyes I'm painting last, and the reason why instead of painting the eyes first, even though they're small areas, is because the white is hard to see if you painted it first. Then you wouldn't know if you were going outside the lines or not. So that's the reasoning for that. Let's see how we look here. There we go. Yeah, we're almost almost finished with just the flesh color anyway. Flesh color eyes and mouth, interior mouth. Let's see. I always prefer, I mean, I'm trying to paint this on the small version, but it's better. I can see it better. I prefer just putting it back to the big size. Though I know my image here is cutting out part of the drawing for you guys out there to see it. Sorry about that, but I will always go back and play it so you can see it. But yeah, that's the only failing of this. I don't guess. Well, I guess the way the software for this particular setup works is of where it's putting me in the image. But I don't know. I guess it's kind of got to be there, yeah, because it's that's the full frame. Yeah, that's right. I see now. On my end, I see areas in space in which I would think the designers of the software could put the image of the commentator host, me. But when I look at it, I realize that, oh, that's actually would be outside of the frame. And I don't know whether or not I'm allowed to move that image or make it bigger or smaller. So I'm going to leave that alone because, you know, well, I'm just going to leave it alone. So, anyways, yeah, see, going around these edges so that then it's easier to fill in. And I can just paint buckets and get the. I like being out big because a lot of times there's little cracks of white that is popping through or that I wouldn't see if the image was bigger or smaller, rather. So, yeah. How are we doing time wise? Pretty good. Let's see. And someone would say, "Oh, well, why don't you just paint, swath the paint like instead of dropping it in? Oh, it's just faster. It's faster." So, also, if you're doing, I've said this before, but like I say, we get new people all the time. Um, if uh, if you're filling in color, you have to make sure that all of the areas are roped off so that when you drop the color in, it's not going to spill outside of the lines of the color. Whatever boundaries of color that you create, um, that's where the color is going to spill. So if you haven't tied off an area where you're paint using your paint bucket, then the color will, like for instance, if I put, well, you can't see it over here, but if I leave a section open, the color is going to spill out. Okay, I think most of us know that from. All right, so see when I go to fill in color, it stays where it's supposed to stay, but that's only because I've put a boundary around that color so that it doesn't spill outside. And yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Doing time wise. Yeah, we're getting up on 30 minutes here. Okay, so, anyways, we're getting closer. Today is Wednesday, I think. Yeah. So we should be done with the color soon. Yeah, I think we're gonna be done with this pretty soon. All right, folks. Well, there you go. So yeah, looking good. Looking good. Yeah. See, if I had gone over everything and done a clean line, this probably would have taken another whole week just to get the line work done, I would think. But a lot of that depends on how much time I spend doing it. Of course, I was just working now and talking to you while I was doing that. So saving, instead of stopping and talking, I just keep working. Because this part of the job is a little easier. I don't have to put on my thinking cap so much. That's another beauty of hand drawn animation is that there's sort of there's a period of time in what you're doing where you're coasting. The thinking process is the hard part in the beginning where you're trying to figure out what you're doing. And then the easy part is once you're doing in betweens and color and all that kind of stuff. Alrighty then. Okay, folks, have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. And don't forget, Jesus is Lord.